Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Yusuf Aram. Ankara has long been one of Israel's fiercest critics, even before the war in Gaza. But tensions between the two have only escalated since the fall of Bashar al-Assad. With Iranian and Russian influence in Syria fading, Israel has ramped up its strikes and military action, especially in the occupied Golan Heights. The shifting ground has forced Ankara and Tel Aviv into indirect deconfliction talks, with Azerbaijan playing mediator. Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan confirmed the talks are purely technical and not a step towards normalization. Last month, reports emerged that Türkiye was moving to take control of a strategic base near Palmyra. Days later, Israel hit the site in an airstrike. Since then, strikes have paused as both sides engage in quiet, back-channel communication. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu faces growing global outrage over his deepening Gaza offensive and the ongoing aid blockade. So with tensions high, talks tentative, and Gaza under fire, is this a fragile opening or just a pause before the next flashpoint? Furthermore, joining me in studio is Mehmet Özkan, a professor of international relations at Türkiye's National Defense University. From Tel Aviv, Gideon Levy, an author and journalist at Haaretz newspaper. And from Baku, Rusuf Huseynov, director of the Top-Chubashov Center, a Baku-based think tank. Gentlemen, thanks for joining me. Mehmet, let's start with you. About a month and a half ago, after a changing dynamic in Syria, the Israelis started voicing concerns that there could be a direct conflict between themselves and the Turks on Syrian soil. Do you share those concerns? Did you see that same thing that the Israelis saw?
No, I think it was unrealistic because neither regional conditions nor the global conditions are conducive to that. So it was unrealistic. But what happens, of course, both sides, they have different vision with regard to the future of Syria. That's why they push so they make their hands powerful in the negotiations, in the process. But the conflict or direct conflict was not realistic at all. But perhaps some little frictions, touching each other, perhaps, touching the nerves of each other could have been. That's what happened. But other than that, a conflict that everybody was talking, it was unrealistic, and it wasn't really seemed to be, a policy option for both sides.
Gideon, when we look at Israel and its national security concerns, over the past half century, the number one national security concern was Iran and the Shiite land bridge that ran through Syria. So when Bashar al-Assad fell and you had the new administration come in, it seemed like Iran was expelled. In its place, with the influence, Türkiye, a country that's in NATO, a country that recognizes Israel, a close ally of the United States as well. One would think that the Israelis would have been happy with this outcome, but it doesn't seem that way. Do you share that opinion?
Yes, absolutely. Israel again and again, instead of trying to find paths toward its neighbors and other players in the region, it's always about more friction and more aggression, and I can't understand it. In Syria, there is an opportunity for Israel for a really new chapter, new page. I'm not sure, it's not guaranteed, but Israel, instead of trying to find a way to implement this chance, Israel is bombing in Syria. With Turkey, I never understood why did we get to where we got, because the interests are much stronger than the rhetorics. The rhetorics of Mr. Erdogan in the recent months against Israel was very harsh, and I can understand that Israel didn't accept it. But behind those harsh expressions, there are so many mutual interests between Israel and Turkey in the Middle East, above all, obviously, Iran, but not only. People to people, it always worked between Israel and Turkey, and Israelis love to come to your country again and again. It was the most popular destination, and everything went very smooth. And I think it will be much easier than we think to reset and to get back to the same positions that we have been before this horrible war.
Rusif, now on one side you have Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. On the other side, you have Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. The clashes between them, obviously, very, very fierce rhetorically. And now you have Azerbaijan and Azerbaijan's president Ilham Aliyev stuck in the middle. Do you view Azerbaijan as the right platform or the right conduit to sit down these two countries in these deconfliction talks?
Well, hello, Yusuf. Absolutely, because Azerbaijan considers Turkey a fraternal ally and Israel a strategic partner. And a hostility between these two countries would be the most nightmarish scenario for Azerbaijan. And Azerbaijan's facilitation attempts are not actually novel, because even prior to the 7th of October events, the policymakers in Baku actually made a lot of efforts to bring Israel and Turkey closer. And they actually succeeded to some extent. However, the war in Gaza derailed this whole process, and now the Azerbaijani side is trying to give a new impetus for the normalization efforts. Yes, in my opinion, Azerbaijan would be the ideal platform for these two countries to at least to sit down together and engage in certain talks. It can be Syria, it can be Iran, it can be the wider Middle Eastern context.
Mm-hmm. So, Mehmet, Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan said these talks are purely technical, not diplomatic in nature. Now, as a professor at Turkish National Defense University, obviously being these technical talks, they're mainly talking about military. What exactly are they talking about? Who's most likely at the table? Are there generals? Are there high-level military brass? Is it more foreign ministry officials? And what exactly are they talking about?
You know, basically, I think even the name of this process, deconfliction, is not a good term. I think de-escalation would be a better term, because if there is a conflict, then you can talk about deconfliction. But there is escalation at discursive level and also some practical level, some touching the nerves of each other in Syria. That's why it could be de-escalation could be much, much better. But of course, technical level, there is nothing came out. But I expect in between intelligence and other institutions, there were talks between them. But mainly, it was trying to pave the way for a possible cooperation and not to come to each other. We should also separate what's happening in Gaza and in Syria. There are two separate issues. Sometimes when we look at Turkey-Israel relations, the both are merged. That's why, I mean, if we can separate both sides, because Turkish approach to Syria is different, Turkish approach to Gaza is different, same for Israel. I think these talks are based on mostly on Syrian file, which is a different option, and there are opportunities for both sides, and there is Trump is there supporting for both sides, and so it's a good advantage for the both cooperation. But what happens when these things mix each other at discursive level, public level, social media, other level, people talk about the possible conflict. But as I said, I mean, it's not very realistic. But the technical talks, it seems it's helping, it's serving, because at the end, I mean, neither in Syria does not threaten to each countries as ontological level or existential level. So, I mean, if they go to war, if there is a conflict, both sides are to lose, not to win. So these deconfliction talks, I mean, de-escalation in a better terms, I think would be serving for the interest of the both sides. They are testing the waters both sides. I think eventually they will come to a mutual understanding. That's why, I mean, what's happening in Azerbaijan is extremely important, and they're helping very well in this process.
Gideon, after the fall of Bashar al-Assad, you have Ahmed al-Shara, obviously former HTS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham and al-Qaeda spinoff. So the threat perception or the security perception from Tel Aviv at first was, oh my God, there's an al-Qaeda spinoff in power in Damascus. But over the past couple months, it seems like al-Shara has been making a lot of peaceful overtures to Tel Aviv. He has not reacted to any of the military action coming from Israel. Has he been a pleasant surprise, or has this been unexpected?
It depends for whom. For me personally, for sure it was a pleasant surprise, because he was so careful not attacking Israel in rhetorics, and he was really careful not to reacting to Israeli bombardments. And this could, as I said before, promise a new page between the two countries. But there are many in the security establishment and in the government who have some doubts for two things. First of all, is he really an Al-Qaeda, or is he only an Al-Qaeda in civil suits, and not more than this? And the second question is also, which became stronger after what the Secretary of State, the American Secretary of State, said: how solid is his government? How strong and well-based is it? Or is it, as the Secretary of State said, that it might fall within weeks? So both opinions are mixing together in Israel.
Rusif, if these talks fall apart and if there is some type of kinetic engagement between the Turks and the Israelis, where does that leave Azerbaijan?
Very good question. As I said earlier, any hostility between Israel and Turkey is the most unwanted scenario for the policymakers in Baku. This is why they would invest all their best efforts in order to somehow mend their relations. If mending their relations is too big a word, then at least engagement is what Baku will try to pursue. Because for some years, the Azerbaijan, Israel, Turkey triangular cooperation had served, maybe it still serves, as Baku's geopolitical dream for this region. This is why the derailing of the process is really not wanted in Baku. And I am sure there will be a lot of efforts from our capital in order to somehow at least keep Israel and Turkey in the same room of discussion.
Mm-hmm. So, Mehmet, I want to rewind back 2 years ago. There was a rapprochement in full swing.
Yes.
Turkish President Erdogan and Israeli President Herzog were meeting. They were talking about gas pipelines. They were talking about bilateral trade. They were also talking about a mechanism for the relationship to help withstand shocks. Now, it doesn't seem like that mechanism held. Why didn't it hold? And from where we are right now, do you see a path that could lead back to diplomacy between two countries?
I think diplomacy is already in the action. You know, the talks in Azerbaijan is already part of diplomacy. But what happened 7th of October has changed regional dynamics. And 8th of December, the fall of Bashar Assad has also changed another dynamics in the region. Plus with the Trump's coming to power and the war in Ukraine. But you see all dynamics has changed. And plus inside the, politics inside the Israel, especially with the Netanyahu's position. So what happened, what we see, yes, there is always diplomacy. I think there is always talk. The issue is at which level they are talking to each other. I'm sure they are talking to each other. That's why they are having this talk. But what happens now, as we see, everybody's trying to find out what is the future, what is the next step in this regional and global dynamics, especially after the fall of Bashar Assad, because they all try to define the future of Syria in a way that will help their national interests. That's the main issue. But otherwise, I would say there is always diplomacy, but perhaps we will see a clearer way when the Ahmed al-Sharaa get more legitimacy and perhaps can take more control of the country in terms of what we see future of the Syria is more clear to us, then I expect there will be again more diplomacy going on between Israel and Turkey. But of course the issue of Gaza is another issue that Turkey is asking for the pressure from global politics, from other countries, and that will be a pending issue as well. But I think none of them will prevent diplomacy working in the relations between these two countries.
Mm-hmm. Gideon, I want to ask you about U.S. President Donald Trump. Now, Trump has signaled that he wants to see a return to the Abraham Accords. Obviously, with Netanyahu in power, that seems kind of tough, I think. This is my personal view. I don't know if you share it. And I think any type of rapprochement with the Turks would be tough with Netanyahu in power. Can that happen, or do you think these Muslim powers will wait for an Israeli election before they sit down at the table with Israel for any type of normalization?
I don't think the problem is Netanyahu. I think the problem is the war in Gaza. And as long as we are witnessing those images from Gaza, I don't see any rapprochement or any kind of improving of the relations when half of the world, and maybe the whole world, is turning its back to Israel, and some are even talking about sanctions. Don't expect Turkey and Israel becoming friends all of a sudden, yes? So we will have to wait to end this war, hopefully soon, and then things might look different, and then maybe also new opportunities will be reopened. But as long as people are being killed and people are starving in Gaza, I don't see any diplomatic efforts except of trying to hold and not to deteriorate and not to get into a real war, which I agree to what was said here was not realistic from the beginning. Turkey and Israel were not close to a war as some try to portray. But in any case, except of really calming down the frictions, nothing can happen until this war will end. That's the basic condition for any progress.
Rousseff, I want to ask you, when this diplomacy and mediation is going on in Baku, the Azerbaijani public, do they want to see Türkiye and Israel have some type of normalization or have some type of relationship where they're not at odds with each other? And also, how concerning is Iran if there is more tension between Türkiye and Israel for Azerbaijan?
Yeah, absolutely. But the public opinion in Azerbaijan does also support the country's efforts in the Israeli-Turkish rapprochement. And here, yes, you are absolutely right. The Iran is a crucial element of this geopolitical mosaic, because one of the reasons why Azerbaijan and Iran are at odds is the former's strategic alignment with Turkey and Israel, which the people in Tehran see as a security threat for the country. And more than that, the Azerbaijani-Turkish axis, which is usually driven by a very simple but emotional formula, one nation, two states, and in which the alliance is simply a kinship turned into statecraft and goes usually beyond all these realistic, geopolitical calculations. Also, create some sort of concern in Iran about Turkic integrationist projects, pan-Turkist narratives, and Azerbaijan irredentism. And therefore, of course, it would be in Iran's best interest that the talks between Israel and Turkey are disrupted, but hopefully the rational policymakers on both sides, or maybe on the three sides of this engagement, will definitely invest their best efforts in order to proceed with this whole framework.
Mehmet, Erdogan's been very pragmatic in the past. His relationship with Abdel Fattah Sisi, the Egyptian president, regardless of his personal views, he was able to fix it because it was in Turkey's interest. Bashar al-Assad, he tried to reach out towards the end, but again, Assad didn't pick up the phone, and we saw what happened there. Mohammed bin Salman, he now has a great relationship with the Saudi crown prince. Can that happen with Israel, or is Netanyahu just too toxic, too much of a red line that's done?
I agree with Gideon, because the issue now, the war in Gaza, as long as this image is coming from Gaza, it's making difficult for any leader in any part of the world, including Turkey, to make such a very well rapprochement with Israel. Because the issue in Gaza is no longer beyond, and it's beyond humanitarian issue now. It is unbearable. Even in many countries from the Western capitals now, they talk about openly criticizing Israel. So there is a new dynamic now. In this environment, Erdogan cannot be pragmatist in that sense. But what happens? Turkey will keep all the options. At different level, there will be communication. I'm sure there is communication at different level. They speak to each other. They voice their concern or differences and different approaches. But what happens at the end? As I said, there is a regional dynamics is changing, and what we'll see how this setup will come out with the Trump's help. So if the Trumps can be constructive in that sense, both in Syria, as we have seen, they lift the sanctions. And then the issue in Gaza, if we can find some sort of solution, let's see what happens, at least to easing of the anger from different part of Turkey, perhaps we can see a pragmatic level in foreign policy playing in. Otherwise, I mean, it holds even the leader's hand. I mean, they have limited options. It makes them difficult to act in that way.
Gideon, I want to ask you a two-part question. The previous Abraham Accord deals that were made, do you feel that they've trickled down into the public, into the countries that they were made with, or have they been on a government-to-government level? And part two of the question is, let's say tomorrow a ceasefire in Gaza is signed. How sustainable is peace in the Middle East, or at least peace with Israel amongst its Muslim or Arab neighbors, until an actual two-state solution is agreed upon?
So the first part is easier to answer. The second part is harder to answer. As about the first part, no doubt. I mean, the figures talk. Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Israelis travel to Dubai and Abu Dhabi every year now. Dubai became a hub for flights for Israelis, replaced Istanbul, by the way. And it's one of the most popular destinations for Israelis, and they all feel they are very well and very secure, which made those Abraham Accord into something very visible, not only between government and government. I'll give you one example. I mean, most of the international airlines stopped flying to Israel ever since the Houthi missile fall in our airport, in Ben Gurion Airport, and Air Dubai, Fly Dubai, and Emirates continue to fly without any interruption. So yes, they have a lot of meaning, economical meaning, a touristic meaning, people-to-people meaning, much more than governments. But it is one niche. This is not the core issue. And here I come to the second part of your question. We can continue to play all kinds of games. As long as the Palestinian problem will not be solved, there will be no bypasses. There might be bypasses like the Abraham Accord, which are totally marginal relatively to the main issues, and they are a kind of bypass, but they don't stabilize the whole region. As long as the Palestinian problem is still there, and it is there, maybe in its worst condition ever, after this horrible war, after this second Nakba that the Palestinians are going through in Gaza, only after solving it, but a real solution, not an American superficial solution, but a real just solution. Only after this we will be able really to believe in all the diplomatic efforts and see real results and real stability.
Rousseff, it seems that Azerbaijan got a lot of criticism for its relationship with Israel over the past year and a half, especially from its Muslim country friends, whether it be in the Turkic states or throughout the Muslim world. How do you think Aliyev has handled that criticism? Has he been able to balance it out? And also the criticism for his direct relationship with Netanyahu. Do you feel that he's done a good job of being able to handle that criticism? And will he feel justified if he makes, not peace, let's say, but at least averts some type of escalation between the two countries?
You used the right term, balancing. It's been a crucial element of Azerbaijan's foreign policy in the past 30, 35 years since our independence from the Soviet Union. And indeed, even in its policy vis-à-vis Israel, Azerbaijan has always taken into consideration the public opinion in the Islamic world as well. So I'll give you a clear example. When Azerbaijan opened an embassy in Israel a couple of years ago, of course, it resonated a lot in the Muslim world. A lot of criticism popped up. But at the same time, to balance this step, Azerbaijan simultaneously opened an embassy in Ramallah. While the relations between Azerbaijan and Israel are deepening, the authorities in Baku, they are also supporting the two-state solution. So this balancing is part of this whole game. And I think the policymakers who in Baku, in Azerbaijan's capital, have been doing a great job in playing this very sensitive and delicate game.
Gideon, Rusif, thank you for joining me. Mehmet, Onset, thank you for joining me. Great comments, great insight from all three of you.
Thank you very much.
And that's all for this edition of Straight Talk with me, Yusuf Aram. If you got any comments, please share them with us on X at Straight Talk TRT. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can find more exclusive content. Until next time, take care and goodbye.